Hello, good evening, everyone. We're going to be starting our joint meeting between the Planning Board and the City Council. And we have a work session to start, and we have a joint special meeting. And before we kick things off with City Planner Shelley Norton, and I want to just quickly go around and do introductions. If we can start with you, Committee Member Smith.
Amy Smith, Planning Board Member.
Alex Pine, Planning Board Member.
Joshua Najin, Planning Board Member, Ward 1.
Michael Marcotte, Planning Board Member, Ward 7.
Roger Dupree, Planning Board Member, Ward 4.
Shanna Cox, Planning Board Member, Ward 3 and Vice Chair.
Lee Albert, Planning Board Member, Ward 6.
Stephanie Gelinas, City Councilor, Ward 7.
Increment, City Councilor, Ward 6.
Rick LaChapelle, City Council, Ward 4.
Carl Shalin, Mayor of Lewiston.
Lucy Bisson, Planning Board, Ward 4, and I'm the chair of the Planning Board.
Scott Harriman, City Council, Ward 3.
Bob McCarthy, City Councilor, Ward 2.
And Linda Scott, City Councilor, Ward 1.
Thank you all for being here. And Planner Norton, if you can take it away from here.
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. So tonight we have before you the final version of the update to the Riverfront Island Master Plan. Just a little background, the original plan was adopted in 2012. Since then, there have been a number of implementations that have occurred that were highlighted in that plan. We looked at this figure together as a group back in February when we met to look at the draft of the plan. A few things that we want to highlight. There was the new restaurant at the Depot building was one of the successes from the past plan. The Franco-American Heritage Center, bike lane that got added over to New Auburn on the bridge, and new connections to Simard Payne Park on Lincoln Street. There are a number of elements from this plan that are still in progress today. The Continental Mill being reused as housing. There are plans to actually start moving that forward. The Museum LA, which has been rebranded as Main Mill, is fundraising to move into the building next to Simard Payne Park. And there's a number of other improvements to Simard Payne Park itself that Public Works has been moving forward in recent years. Most recently, docks, and then they're moving forward with a boat launch, which we'll talk about in a minute. So this is some of the exciting things that have been done in the past. Tonight, we're looking at essentially like the next 10 years for this plan with the new update. The update was intended to focus on 5 specific topics. The first initiative was to look at the Riverwalk itself and downtown connections. The second was to focus on the Island Point redevelopment. The third, to look at infill and how the city might revitalize vacant properties we have in the downtown in that riverfront area. The fourth is the focus specifically on Simard Payne Park, look at its programming and how that might be enhanced going forward. And then finally, the city had taken control of the canals, ownership of the canals, since the first plan was done. And so this plan was intended to focus on how we might engage with those facilities and have the public engage with them going forward. So what this presentation seeks to do is just look at some of the upcoming projects from the new plan that staff and administration have started working on behind the scenes, and that we actually have funding in place for or are actively seeking funding for. The first is that boat ramp in the park, and so that is going out to bid in the next few months. Public Works has been working on that, and construction is anticipated to happen this fall after the big summer events in the park are completed. As part of the update, there were recommendations made for zoning changes that could benefit that portion of the city, and planning staff does anticipate bringing those forward to Planning Board and Council for adoption potentially this fall is our intent. The Red Shop, which is on the canal next to Simmered Payne Park and on the Riverfront Trail, is undergoing design right now, preliminary design for redoing the exterior of the building and doing some basic facilities inside so it could actually be usable for more than storage, which is how it's been used currently. They've done some foundation work and shoring up of the building. At this point, they're working on determining really what the use will be for that building to help finalize the design plans. It will be going out to bid later this year, and then the intent is to be in construction next year. There is already a ribbon walk next to the train station that's quite beautiful. The intent has been to continue that walk in some way, shape, or form, maybe not exactly the same design, through the park to the pedestrian bridge that connects across the river. There are designs in here for road work as well to be done to provide circulation and parking for the park and for event facilities for organizers and other needed parking for trucks and equipment during events. This would require that the city acquired Beach Street. That recently happened, and now staff is working with consultants on early design of this walkway and parking and roadway. There's discussion as to whether a pavilion or stage would be used there. So there's discussion about some of the elements of the plan and how those fit together. The hope is that this would be under construction in 2024. As far as extending the Riverwalk itself, federal funding was secured to extend it next to the powerhouse over the canal. There would be a new bridge, and to bring it around the Continental Mill. There's survey work that's beginning and design happening right now that it will expect to happen kind of for much of this year, I would say, with construction anticipated to happen in the next couple of years, coordinating that with the redevelopment at the Continental Mill project. I will point out on this diagram where it's a number 1, that area of the riverfront is not part of this design plan, but we do have, there has been, I didn't put it on the slide, but there was a request made for federal funding to have that extension to Simmered Payne Park funded federally. So that has been put forward, and we'll kind of wait and see whether funding comes forward to do that portion. And then finally, this was one of the highlights of the canal plan, to do a large implementation project to bring people closer to the river, or sorry, to the canal itself, to get activity happening in the canal. This is one of the shallowest portions of the canal, so it's a great spot to do that implementation. This project includes pedestrian crossing from Oxford Street over the canal into Simmered Payne Park, which would be on the left-hand side of that plan, a little bit cut off further down. Redesigning Oxford Street to narrow up the travel lanes and add parking, which would allow a bit more space for pedestrian amenities along the canal. It creates seating and overlooks on the west side of Oxford Street, and then those steps on the east side of Simmered Payne Park on the other side of the canal. And this is the concept of having those stairs, having activity in the canal, whether it be physical activity as shown here, hockey in the winter, kayaking in the summer, or have lighting or other elements, sculpture in the canal that could be viewed. This particular project, we did apply for federal funding, and that request has been put forward by Senator Collins. So we'll wait and see how that goes. If it's awarded, the funding would be for fiscal year '24, and then the city has committed some local matching funds for that. That's what we have this evening for you for a formal presentation, just a taste of what staff and administration are hoping gets put forward in the next couple of years for implementation of the plan. And this evening, we're hoping for any discussion or questions you want to have, and that the two boards would move forward with adopting the plan, and any suggestions or thoughts you have on the implementation work would be welcome.
I appreciate you guys have been working hard on this for months now, right? Appreciate all of your help and Halverson's help. When this is by the canal, this is the demo project we talked about, right?
Yeah.
When is this happening, or when are we getting started on that?
So those stairs, we have applied for federal funding. Senator Collins' office has put that forward. I don't know exactly what the time frame is for those awards. I don't know when we will hear. Economic development staff might actually have a better knowledge of that. Do you happen to know the timeline? Do you know?
We'll find out next spring.
Okay, so we'll find out next spring. So there's a little bit of a wait there.
Thank you. Further comments from board members or counselors? Counselor Scott.
Thank you. So really appreciate looking at this, reading through it. My family even looked at it this weekend and were super excited, saying, wow, this is the kind of stuff that we're going to have happening. So I really appreciate the work that's been done here. I'm excited that we're going to be doing something immediately with the red building, the red, right? You know, the red shop. We're going to be working on that. And I'm happy that we're reaching out for federal funding with Susan Collins' office. I really appreciate that. I just think that this is a good thing, and let's continue moving forward. This is how we're going to get Lewiston moving forward. And I really think that with this, we can start really working with economic development and working with businesses and get people excited to hopefully come in, and new businesses coming in. So I think this is a good step for Lewiston. I really appreciate all the work that's been done. Thank you.
One of the things that I appreciate this plan is that they've, Halverson, along with you, have created this rubric for implementation, projects. Have we created, use that to create a timeline of what's next, or what we're going to tackle in what order?
Yeah, so the matrix does have a section of it that talks about whether it should be a earlier priority, medium, or long range. And part of the rationale for how they came up with those designations either had to do with how easy it would be to implement based on whether we already own the property, or how technically difficult it was, or how expensive, and then also whether certain tasks or projects needed to happen first in order for something else to happen. So they weighted those things and came up with those designations. So I think, yeah, as we move forward, once the plan is adopted, that will be the next step for staff to start looking at that. What we presented tonight were items that we know are on the horizon, or there's already effort that's been made, but there's certainly a number of other implementation items that we didn't present this evening.
You mentioned that we've already received money for the Beach Street implementation, or received federal funding?
Yeah, so if sorry, that's not up there. We received funding for for the bridge over the canal, and for number 2 there, the river walk along the Continental Mill. So that's funding that was applied for, similar to how funding was just applied for the stairs. This was applied for a couple of years ago and has been awarded. So it's not directly related to Beach Street, but it will provide a critical connection between Beach Street and Cedar Street. And then there's just that smaller portion in front of the future main mill location that we'll need to connect the dots with.
When do we anticipate work starting on that?
So right now, there is some initial survey work happening, and there will be design work, and engineering has been working through the process for getting those federal funds this spring. So there's a couple of hoops that they have to jump through. So they've been doing that and are gearing up now to start the design work. I don't know when the funds actually hit, like when we actually have the money in hand, but they will be moving forward with designing that once the money is in hand.
Councilor Scott.
Thank you. Just to follow up on that, that's coordinated with the Picker House construction that's going to be happening soon, so that there's not going to be any work done then have to be redone, right?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, we don't want to have to, that done and then have the construction come in for the Picker House and any of that design, you know what I mean, and have to redo.
Yes, so staff did meet with the developer and look at their location for their parking and so forth, and how it relates to the easement that we have for the trail along the water. And there's been discussion about whether we need to tweak that easement at all. So some of those kind of pre-design elements are happening right now. So we anticipate in the next couple months to be able to start actually moving forward with more serious design. But the timing works out nicely that we have the funding and they're actually starting to move forward with their preliminary site work design, not in implementation, but they're starting to do that work. So they have surveyors out there now, I believe.
Do we have a time frame on that, when construction might be starting on that building?
On the
The
building?
housing?
On Picker House?
Yeah, the
or-
Picker House,
They're
yeah.
having a
They've started.
groundbreaking on June 7th.
Yes.
I got an email.
So,
Yes.
yeah.
They've started on it now.
I wanted to put it publicly out there. I just want this
Yes.
talked about because
Yep.
this is a big deal. We talk about housing all the
Absolutely.
time, right? And this is what, 76 units? And, I mean, we're looking at not only having 76 units, but a nice walkway added to that area. I mean, this is a big thing for Lewiston, and I think we need to promote this and talk about it. Thank you.
Board Member Pine.
Yeah, just to echo what Councilor Scott was saying, I think of all the Lewiston residents in the room, I'm probably the shortest duration one. I moved here only a handful of years ago, and what convinced me to move here was one of the riverfront pathways. I was sort of like, oh, I don't know. And then I walked down there when I was looking at a house, and it was like, oh, this is where I'm going to live. This is wonderful. So, yeah, this is very important work. I mean, a path by the river seems kind of inconsequential maybe on some level, but I think it really makes a difference for people moving here and for people seeing that there's investment in the city.
Planning Board Member Albert.
Thank you. So just a couple of comments. One, full support as well. I think this is exceptionally exciting. And as I was reading it, I was just in Quebec City 2 weekends ago, and it feels very similar to what's along the St. Lawrence there. It's a good bike path and the benches and whatnot. If I may just offer a couple of case studies to add. It seems like it's robust in the back, but North Adams, Massachusetts in particular with Mass Mocha, thinking about Maine Mill and the museum and the vitality that has brought to Western Massachusetts. And then for the canals, I didn't see any case studies, and forgive me, they may have come up in the focus discussions, but Ottawa has a really robust canal system, and Providence, Rhode Island as well. So just as we think about knowing the funding is still pending there, but as that begins to take shape design-wise even further, those I would put forward as two fabulous case studies.
Thank you.
Board Member Cox.
Thank you. I also love this. I think it is an amazing marketing tool to invite development. I think appropriately, Ms. Norton, all of your slides reference federal funding, local funding, and match as it should, and that makes sense in this room. But those commitments will leverage private investment. I have full confidence in that, and I think that's really exciting. The image on page 75 is kind of buried, and I actually think this is a really strong organizing principle for the planning board as we're considering the zoning language changes and all of those pieces. But I love how clearly this lays out and supports existing use. I think some of the concerns were how any redevelopment of the Riverfront Island might subtract or pull away from the development that we've seen and improvements on Lisbon Street for small and local businesses. And I think this does a really good job at laying out how to organize that so that kind of we actually lift all boats and all businesses. The only note on that is, and I know that this is tricky, right, is those pathways of pedestrian and bike modes of being able to move from the shopping district to the play district to the live district to the work back and forth. Those pathways are going to be really vital to making sure the investments don't somehow leave out parts of the city. And they're the most design challenging aspects too. And so lifting up, there's like one solution in there that is kind of named around that piece, but lifting up that having at least one good pedestrian means of walking from Lisbon Street after a couple of beverages to go and enjoy 2 or 3 hours before you go shopping and choose to go home is going to be like a really vital piece of people choosing to live in this live block and making sure that all of the uses and businesses really are successful in this larger piece, and that's a real challenge. It might take a long time to figure that out and to fund that, and that I hope that we're focusing on the figuring out part in the implementation matrix early, even if the actual implementation is later. It's just a note of thoughtfulness, because I think this could really transform our community. There's already pressure in our southern Maine markets to move here, and this is the type of amenities that both retirees and younger folks are looking for, and those are two populations that I think really bode well for the future of our city. So, love it. Would love to see this splattered all around.
Further comments? To that end, this will definitely spur private investment. In fact, people have already purchased property, given that the city owns the canals and whatnot. What is the plan, I guess, to, maybe this is for marketing or administration or economic development, how will this plan be widely shared with the community and with the state and potential developers?
I'll take that one and you guys can jump in as you. There's a combination, a multi-pronged approach with that. Obviously, the first starts with the adoption of the plan. The second component includes community outreach, getting the general public excited about it, and then economic development, also using this plan when they go to visit developers, when they talk to other agencies. All of that is in the works. We just needed the hard copy here and it adopted. And now that we have that, it allows us to do, we're looking at even doing something during the Balloon Festival and some of those other larger festivals down in Kennedy Park. Click here to see what's coming in the future. And then, it's that QR code that takes them to this plan and takes them to that step down into the canal so they can start visualizing it as they're actually in the park, and then they can go to other points in that park. So those are the steps that we're looking at now that we've got the plan in hand, and hopefully it's ready to be adopted and executed.
Stand by.
Yes.
Yeah. Further comments? Councilor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What I'd like to see is take one of these and every known developer in this area in central southern Maine and mail it to them with a little note saying, this is the direction Lewiston's moving, come join us and move along with us. So I think that would be a great idea to someone gets this and starts looking through it. It's got a lot of great things in it, and I think it could pique some interest in this area, so I'd like to see that done. Thank you.
No, that's a great idea, and all of the realtors and brokers that have property listed within this area need to get a copy of this plan as well, as they start talking to potential buyers and leasees and so on and so forth. Director Jeffers, did you want to chime in?
If I could just chime in on it, the original Riverfront Island Master Plan still lives at the end of my conference table. It is part of every conversation I have with a visitor to my office. It's pretty shop worn at this point, so I'm looking forward to freshening up what's there. I gave a presentation for Merida when the first Riverfront Island Master Plan rolled out, and from that, multiple developers came to town looking. Eric Chinberg, who owns the Continental Mill and the Hill Mill at this point, when he was up here bidding on it, it was part of our conversation. Just after it came out, Marita was having their annual forecasting conference. We had rolled out the Riverfront Island Master Plan. And Kevin Bunker, who ended up buying 35 Beach Street with the old Pamco Mill, said, I want to be a part of that. I said, you can be, but you can't put affordable housing there. And he ultimately was not able to move forward with it. Tom Platts has bought that property from Kevin, but it has been a very good tool. And so everything that's been said here tonight, as far as really getting it out, they don't have to come into my office. Let's just get this out there and into people's hands. But I just want you to know this has been an incredibly good tool for the city over the years.
Thank you, Director. Councilor Scott?
Sorry, one more thing. So it's all great, but I just want to put a reminder out there. We've got planning board members here. We've got the city council here. We've made plans in the past. We need to make sure we use this. We've had a comp plan, we've had all sorts of plans. Let's make sure that this one doesn't go on a shelf and stay there. This is something we need to use, and we need to recognize it and use it when we're making those choices for economic development, and we're talking to people, and we're going through whatever zoning or whatever it is. This needs to be always part of that conversation. Thank you.
Further comments from the board member Albert?
So just curious, as we talk about thinking about attracting developers, and when I was looking at the demographic data, so it looks sound, but a question I have, so we know that New England, particularly northern New England, is dwindling in population, and the population here is aging. That's been a fact for quite some time. What I'm curious about in this data, or is there a way to add to it, the push we've seen during COVID as folks have moved north and out of urban areas, is there a way to project out what that might be? Because it looks like the way the data was gathered is based on current population and using that within. It's as we all think about folks moving from Portland to Gray to Lewiston, is there a way to show that could attract, if that in fact is true? And it might not be enough to replace the population that's dwindling, so it may in fact remain flat. But as we think about trying to attract developers, is there a way to show that? I mean, the sources look totally reasonable, obviously. I'm just trying to find a way to tell the best story possible.
I think the state has a lot of updated numbers. They're not solidified completely like a census would be. As we all know, the last census should have a do-over, considering it was done in the middle of COVID, and a lot of people rely on that information for a variety of reasons, particularly in the demographic area. We use it for bonds, we use it, for development. Median income is a key benchmark that is used that I'm frankly kind of surprised they haven't tried to do a midpoint update with the census, but I know the state is working on getting some firmer numbers because of that as well. So that may be an opportunity to pull from them.
Councilor Jelinas?
Thank you. I love this document. I think it's so well done. It's colorful. The pictures are fantastic. The planning is great. And while I agree that this is going to be a wonderful tool to help us attract developers, I think it's also a wonderful tool to attract young professionals. A lot of the work that I'm doing in terms of trying to bring clinicians and therapists into Lewiston to work at my agency, I'm having to get them away. And I'm excited because part of the interviewing process is always trying to give a tour, but you don't get a visual like this, really, right? And I have a lot of stuff on the table, from the LA Metro Chamber of Commerce, just of stuff about our community, but I'm planning to put this there too, so thank you for that.
Board Member Cox?
I love this document. I immediately read it from cover to cover, but I'm a planning nerd, which I think makes sense. I love the notion of sending this out to folks, and I think that's realistic. I also think it's super cost prohibitive with a book like this. So I'm wondering if there's some version, not just the executive summary, not like a clean, I'll just cut the front end out, but what it would look like, and you are probably already all over this, but some slimmer, easily, because I can think of so many places that I and my team could port it around and that others could too, that wouldn't be a document like this and that wouldn't cost you a ton to produce or to distribute, and that would work. And I think of the employers that I work with who are doing the same thing, Councilor Jelinas is, and like it is a recruitment tool, not just for developers, but for the workforce that we need to then live in this area and shop at these places and kayak in the canal and do all the things. So you're probably on it.
Yes,
Okay.
there will be a Reader's Digest or Cliff Note version of that, yes.
$1.25 to mail. Yeah, that'd be great.
Anything else you'd like to add, Planner Norton or Director Hediger?
Whether it's, I guess I'll say it now, but just want to thank Shelley for her management of this whole plan going through, because she kind of came in. Folks remember Doug Green. Doug Green got the RFP, he left, and Shelley, do this. And she did it. So we had a great team. We had a good conversations with the group. It's always interesting working with new consultants and how they do public outreach. And I think this was a successful process, how they did that. The meetings they had at the museum, the meetings we had here, the library and here. I think that was a productive process as well. Other staff too, including economic development, they chimed in and helped out with this process too. So certainly a team effort, but I think we have a good document. And you folks and past councils have been really the reason we were able to move forward, to Councilor Scott's point, and Shelley's first screen there. We've picked away things. The idea is, I don't want to see it sit on a shelf either. And both this plan and the comp plan have implementation schedules in there that try to guide us and guide the board and you folks as to how to do that. And we always make a funding request, whether it's our department or economic development, that goes towards either comp plan or the Riverfront. So that continued support is appreciated, so we can pick away at these things as we go forward.
Thank you. Unless there are further questions or comments, we will thank you both. We're going to see you again here soon. And we're going to move on to the next item here, the discussion of collaboration between the City Council and Planning Board. And if I may request, I would like this part of the discussion to be forward-looking. We don't need a rehash of the past. How do we move forward in the best interest of our city? Chair Pizon.
So I'd like to address some remarks to administration as well as City Council, and make clear that these are my personal remarks and not reflect the feelings of the other members of the Planning Board. I believe that the issues that came to head earlier this year were caused by a lack of communication. I would hope that in the future, if there is a project that arises that could be controversial or that needs special consideration, the City Council would seriously consider including the Planning Board in any executive session so that the Planning Board can be made aware of the unique situation with that project and therefore will have all the necessary information to make an informed decision regarding any plan put before them. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. At this point, if we're going to let others weigh in. Board Member Cox.
I appreciate the invitation to be forward-looking. When I think this conversation in the context of the Riverfront Island Master Plan is a beautiful case example to think about what collaboration could look like, and I think most importantly, and when I show up for these meetings, the impact of what happens when we collaborate on something like this that's super tangible. And as we sat through the first initial presentation with the designers of the plan in the room, there was it's in the back, but the island point, I think, is a really good example, right? Where it's going to be really valuable to make sure that we understand the vision that you guys have for what that looks like. And I think the things that feel most important and that my reflection and learning has helped me see what the opportunity is that there are times, appropriately so, that administration and the council has unique and sensitive information about what could be. And what comes to the planning board often in those times appears like a generic zoning request, and we don't have the information about what the proposed use would be, which is very different than when we're looking at like a contract rezone and there's a specific use and a specific applicant and a specific purpose that will be in front of us, and we're facing a room full of residents who are saying, well, but that if you make it that zone, we could have a movie theater next to us, and we don't want that. And it's a valid point, whereas there's many uses within those different zoning ordinances that would allow, I think, exactly the housing opportunities or redevelopment opportunities that we do share as a vision. And I think those are the moments that feel extra challenging. And when I think about this plan and the opportunities to collaborate that are going to come before us, specifically Island Point is a really concrete one, where the process of acquisitions or dispositions or things that might happen that require us to take action or make recommendations to council. And so I don't know, while I love the idea of being invited to executive sessions when it seems appropriate, I also think that the opportunity to have regular planning sessions around implementation, to hear what your vision is or what some of those pieces are that might be coming, so that we can think about those in the context of what can sometimes feel like large spreadsheets that, right? And so I think there's a lot of really tangible opportunities ahead of us to collaborate on realizing the vision for this community that we want for our residents, for our children, for our taxpayers, for our businesses, for our tax base. And I think it'll be a really important opportunity to collaborate. And I'm sure that could look like a million different things, but I hope what you're hearing is an invitation to pick away at a couple of them and get started, because there's no time like now.
Thank you. Councilor LaChapelle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm personally excited about what's happening in Lewiston. We're a big family. We're all Lewistonians. Families fight sometimes, we argue, but we're moving forward. I've been involved in politics or involved in Lewiston city government probably 30 years. I have never seen a city council and a planning department meet 3 times within the time span that we've met so far. I think that speaks volumes on both boards. We have made more changes in the city of Lewiston than the last 100 years, thanks to the planning, David Hediger and his team, and changing zoning. I'm excited. Are we always going to get along? Hell no. We're going to argue sometimes, we're going to disagree, but I believe in my heart that we all have the best interests of Lewiston in moving forward. So I agree 100%. If you recall, believe it or not, I was one that suggested that we meet with the planning board. Yes. I'd like to do that on a regular basis and meet with the planning board as we continue development. I think it's vitally important that we're all on the same page. And we can argue and talk like, this master plan, I'm looking at who decided to put a walkway across in front of the falls. That was silly as far as I'm concerned, but that's, these are just opinions, but I'm all in favor of moving forward. So I don't see a problem in the past. I see a bright future, because how do you judge an individual is what they've accomplished and what we have done. And yes, we might argue a little bit, but look what we have done in such a short period of time. It is absolutely amazing. 3 corridors that have been rezoned, opening up. We're talking about a couple more. I think this is fantastic. So I want to thank the planning board for their patience with us every once in a while. And it's not easy. I was on the zoning board, and yes, and I understand, but I don't want to look at this as a negative at all. I think this is a positive, and I'm excited to move forward with our Lewistonians and making this a better city as we continue to go. Thank you.
Planning Board, Albert.
If I may, just thinking about putting this on paper, not paper per se, but actually making the action steps forward to build off of Shayna's comments. Could we look at the timeline you mentioned, David, and the execution plan or implementation plan, and just get some dates on the calendar for future joint meetings? I'm not saying every month or even necessarily every quarter, but maybe every few months or 6 months, so we just have that to look forward to and use this plan as our center point for the future. I think that'll keep us it'll hold us accountable as we're all deeply committed to this, and it'll have those moments for us to come together to collaborate.
Board Member Najin?
I'd just like to reiterate Councilor LaChapelle's point concerning how much we have accomplished in a very short period of time, which is incredibly impressive, I think, considering the pace in which things have moved sometimes in the past. And in that, you know, a lot of the things that we've agreed upon have been, you know, fairly well either outlined or just demonstrated in ways that it's pretty much undeniable that some of these zoning changes had to occur. And so these meetings where we can share ideas, explore uses, have discussions about some things that I believe will be harder when we come to them, but having a better understanding of the positions in which they're coming from will be very beneficial, and I think a lot of that will come back to case uses for economic development, like where we're actually seeing it work, how it's working, and working in ways to capitalize on what we do have, because we have a lot of great things here. I think often we forget that we have really good restaurants, we have really good businesses, we have long-running businesses that have been in this community for generations, and we have families who have lived here since they immigrated in you know, the 1850s, 1860s, and so there's a lot of value here, and some of these changes I think will be controversial if we don't discuss them first and have good feedback from our economic development department, from the council, and sharing from the planning board as well, with you know, coming from the position of the comp plan. So it's just, I guess what I'm trying to say ultimately is that these meetings are very, very important, I think, for our communication overall, and working to reach the goal of increasing our tax base and strengthening the city. So.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely agree that we should be meeting on, you know, some sort of regular basis. And the more that we can develop working relationships, I think that we will find that it's, you know, from that it will be easier to find common ground. Board Member Pine.
Yeah, I think thinking about the comments that have been made so far, thinking about this in terms of having that ability to share information, having that ability and that forum to have productive and healthy disagreement, I think is really important. You know, Councilor LaChapelle, you were just saying that, you know, I have an opinion, you have an opinion, everyone has an opinion. But sharing that opinion and being able to talk it out so it goes back and forth allows all parties to refine their opinion, to get more information. That, you know, that opinion, even though we can say it's a subjective thing, it's information. Everyone's bringing their expertise and their experience to it. And so the more expertise and the more experience we can get together, the better that decision's going to be. It'll be painful at times, I'm sure, you know, when you bat things back and forth, that's what happens. But I think the really important thing here is making sure that we have as many opportunities as we can practically do to be able to feed that information back and forth. And maybe that doesn't mean that we're all in the same room. I think being in the same room has a lot of power to it. But I think there's other ways that we can look at sharing information, making sure that everyone is, you know, able to do that cross-pollination. I think the structure of how city government's set up is a very linear one, and there's a lot of value in that. You know, it goes from this committee to that committee to this committee to that committee. It goes through the process, and at the end, you got your cake, or, you know, whatever the result is. So, while that linear process is working, I think we need a more web process for information sharing to inform that linear process. So we should put something on the books. I agree. We need to have some meetings on the books, and I think we should also explore other methods for communicating that are within, you know, guidelines and everything that's above board so that we can share that information and cross-pollinate and have that healthy disagreement and discourse that creates these great decisions.
Councillor Scott?
Thank you. So I kind of want to piggyback off what Member Pine just said, because the linear process is definitely something that we all have to recognize we have. We have a charter that gives us our actual purview and what our roles are and our decision and our work that has to be done. So that's an important piece, right? But at the same time, having that transparency, having those conversations, being open and meeting more often, I think is really where we show our community that we're doing this because we want to see our community move forward. We're working together. We are all, like you said, Lewistonians. Not sure I like that word, though. I don't know why. It just doesn't seem to flow off my tongue so much. But that's just me. But, you know, that's where we show our city and do what we are here to do, right? We didn't all come into this for the money. We came into this because we love this community. Well, we came into this because we love this community, right? And we all want to see something happen. Generally, most of us do. If I look around this room, all of us do stuff outside of our positions on this, whether we're a city council or a planning board, to promote our city and work towards, you know, building our city. And so it's important that we do that collaboration work, but always remember that, you know, we have a charter, we do have roles and purviews, and, you know, there is a certain way to go about doing things. So, thank you.
Board Member Cox.
At the risk of having a crazy idea, I think about the sharing of information and what you've both just discussed here, and I think about the value of us connecting and what we've already named that being. I think there is a secondary benefit to being thoughtful about and what the purpose could be of our meetings, and that is part of it is. And this is recorded. Folks are watching this at home or on YouTube later. And realistically, and I know this firsthand, it is developers, it's potential residents, right? And so how can we be thoughtful about using these shared opportunities, not just to enhance our communication and understanding with each other, but to recognize how, whether we take advantage of it or not, leverage it to the best of its ability or not, our meetings are recorded and shared and are a fact base of information for people who are saying, do I want to wade into a planning process with that planning board? Do I want to have this discussion with that council? And how can we be thoughtful about our shared conversations also being not a marketing tool and not performative, but authentic about the type of development we're inviting, be aware of the language that we're using when we're talking about what could be or what the potential impacts would be, so that we can seek that which we want to invest in and see investment from. And I think that's just another way to think about what we don't have to sit down and update a spreadsheet, right? We can have an open dialogue that also serves a purpose of sharing a public message about a unified voice of what we see the potential is, what kind of development or what type of demographics we're looking. We're looking for younger folks. We're looking for retirees who want healthcare and are going to make the most out of the ribbon walk. Or I think those opportunities are just small language choices that we can use in these spaces that we're already meeting. I'm not saying let's get together for a press conference. Just think about the two birds with one stone that we're able to hit when we're in these spots together and what that looks like for all of the opportunities. It is much more portable and less costly to people seeing that than it is to mail out one of these plans. I'm saying both end here, but people are already accessing information and making choices about how our city acts and works together, and we can use those to our advantage thoughtfully. And I think we have done that a number of times. I wish folks who write news articles and headlines would pick up the progress stories and the redevelopment stories and the way in which we invite businesses and developers to work and be successful in this area. And it's not always the first headline they pick up, but the more we put the good stuff out there, at some point the law of statistics will give us exactly what we would hope for. Thank you.
Thank you. So from this discussion, it looks like one of the outcomes is that we'll be meeting more regularly. What other outcomes are we all feeling that we need at this point? Councillor LaChapelle.
Thank you. Meeting regularly is fine. I don't want to just put a meeting on the schedule and we all get here and we stare at each other. I think there needs to be purpose, direction, if it's talking about the Island Master Plan, or if it's talking about what other ways can we effectively bring in a development, like you're saying, I think there needs to be some kind of a format and an outline on what we're talking about. So yeah, I'm all in favor of it. Every month is not going to work for me. Every 6 months, once every 6 months, a couple times a year, I think it's fine. We've met 3 times in less than a year, and I anticipate possibly having another one in the fall. But it's perfect, but have a set agenda, and you guys talk on your end, we talk on our end, and we throw it all together, and we come and just discuss it. Let's move Lewiston forward, and I think it's possible. This is a great stepping stone. Thank you.
Councilor Janice, did you have something? Okay. Board Member Pine.
To that comment there, I'd like to propose that we consider, one, reviewing plans in terms of the progress we've made on them at these bi-yearly meetings. I think that would be a really good agenda topic. It's good to sort of make sure that you touch base with these things and they don't end up on a shelf in your mind or physically, right? So love to hear in the fall, how has the pathway gone? Have we completed the survey for it? How's the housing project nearby progressing? I think that's really important. I would say another agenda item that I would propose is, are there any big projects that either board sees coming up in the future that we want to talk about together? So making sure that we have a list of those going at all times and just keep it refreshed as 2 bodies, and then we bring it together when we compare notes. Maybe we'll find that, the city council really cares about these projects and the planning board really cares about these projects, and there's some overlap, and those are the ones we want to focus on. I'm just making things up here at that point. And then the other point that I wanted to make outside of the agenda topics is to Councilor Scott's position that we have process. We have positions that we're all filling, that we have duties and obligations that we have. I would love, I'm pretty sure this would be a staff request, or if we could find, again, some pathways for being able to share information that are within our charter, that are, completely above board and meet, cross all the T's and dot all the I's, so that we can keep channels going here outside of just the special meetings.
Thank you. Further comments? Councilor Herman.
Thank you. Also along the lines of sharing information, I'm wondering if when we have executive session information on particular projects that the planning board really needs to know of before they make a decision, if we could either, I don't know if it would be feasible to have a joint executive session, or if we could at least have a confidential memo sent to them, or somehow get that information out so they have everything they need before they make a decision.
Councilor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Going along these lines, one of the things that I think needs to happen also is that if we can't share information, that we're trusted, that we're making the best decision, that we're all looking for what's best in Lewiston, to go on in Lewiston, and that there may be times where we can't share that information with you, but trust that we've discussed it and come up with the best solution. I think that the way the structure is in Lewiston, as far as, we talk about linear, and there are times when we're privy to information that needs to stay within the council, and we have to make decisions based on that. And I think that it's, extremely important that if in those situations that you trust that we're making the best decision. Thank you.
Board Member Nagy.
Generally, when things come before the planning board, there's an indication that staff has made a recommendation to either accept or not accept. We don't actually get any feedback on the position of council, just to point that out. So there are details, I think, that are shared sometimes where we just don't know what was discussed at all. And so that's trying to figure out a way to solve that. Maybe there isn't one, right? But we don't know what the decision was sometimes, is what I'm referring to. And so.
Councilor McCarthy?
I think in those situations that if staff is bringing it to you, then most likely your council has okayed that. You know, in most cases, I don't think staff works on their own. But, I mean, I'd be open to you having the ability to ask the staff when they bring it forward, has this been before the council? You know, just a generic question. You don't need to get into detail about what happens in executive session or whatever, but you can just make sure that, you know, it has come before, and then you can base your decision on that. If they say it hasn't come before the council, then, you know, things are wide open, and it's a different scenario than if the council is sending it to the planning board, with, you know, with the staff's, you know, whatever the staff is bringing forward.
Yeah, so to Board Member Pine's point, like, I guess it would be helpful to understand what is permissible under, you know, the charter and practice and so forth. You know, communication builds trust, and the more, you know, I would advocate that the more communication that could exist, the better it is for everybody. Board Member Nagy, did you have something else?
I was just going to slightly piggyback off of what Councilor McCarthy just said, which is that I do think it's important as well that we do have faith and trust in staff and support them as well. So certainly, thanks.
Councilor Clement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Voice is not with me tonight, so I'll try to make this as brief as possible. You know, I defer to that great philosopher Yogi Berra, who said, you can hear a lot by listening. I've sat back and I've listened here tonight, and most particularly to Councilor Scott, Councilor McCarthy, and also Councilor LaChapelle. It's not going down easy, folks. Two words that I mentioned to a developer not too long ago here were trust and transparency. Okay, part of things that have happened in the past have evolved from those two words. When people are not transparent with us as to their intention, sometimes we don't get good information. To the idea of process, we are hemmed in sometimes. Developers come in here sometimes with some really big ideas, really big money, and they are adamant that nobody knows anything about that. But they've got to tell us if they want to get our ear at all. So if we can develop trust and transparency, I think it will help us all. I'm not against having joint meetings. I will agree with Councilor LaChapelle to just have a meeting is not going to be fruitful at all. We have enough of those here. I don't know if you folks, you meet twice a month, I believe, basically?
No, yeah, twice a month.
Yeah, twice a month. Well, that's in a good month. We're going to be 3 or 4 times. And then budget season and everything else, and we're all on committees, and it's just a fun time trying to plan your life around it. But we're here for the money, contrary to what somebody did. But I do think one thing that came up in this conversation, why this master plan must be available as an e-file.
I'm sorry?
Is the master plan itself available as an electronic file?
That's what I want to make sure we have the consultant's permission to reproduce it.
Yep, I would
It's
think that
actually already posted online.
So,
It's on the website.
then we ought to be making that available, that information available to everybody in the world. Come take a look at this and see what we can, I think you've heard these words before, what can we do to help you? Okay? That's something I believe in. That's why we're here. I believe in Lewiston. I'm not a native of Lewiston. My wife is, and anything she says in my household usually goes, so therefore I'm all for Lewiston. But electronic file would be big, developing trust and transparency, and I think Councilor McCarthy hit it square on the head when he said, sometimes you're just gonna have to trust us. I'm not comfortable with some of the information we get. And we had an incident last term that caused us to rewrite our rules and solidify things about information that was passed around in executive session and leaked. We had a situation where we had an executive session and a former mayor got a phone call from the press within 10 minutes of that meeting being adjourned, asking questions about what had just gone on in executive session. The only people that could have passed that information along were the people in the executive session. There was no press, there was nobody else in the building. And we rewrote our rules, and it's become basically quite hard and fast. We have to be very careful about what we say and how we say it. So there are going to be times when we can't divulge. But believe me, it's not that we don't want to. The more people that know and can get involved in the decision-making process, the better it's going to be for everybody. I truly believe that. But I hope that we don't rub you the wrong way when some of these things happen, but it's just life in the fast lane, I guess is the best way to say. So I am all for working together. Let's get on with it. And, I think this plan is great. I've had a chance to look at it several times over the weekend. I kept falling asleep while I was reading it because of the cold, but that's not to say that it's not exciting. I do think that there are some things in here that are going to be very beneficial for the city. And that's all I've ever wanted since I ran the first time, was to make Lewiston a better place. When I first came back here from out of state, I kept hearing the dirty Lou thing, and it bothered me. It really bothered me. I know it bothered my mother and father-in-law, who were native Lewistonians. They were blue-collar Lewistonians, very proud of the heritage, and it bothered them, and I can understand why. I worked in my first career in a place called Disgusta, okay? So the same thing happens no matter where you are. But let's work together, let's move Lewiston forward and have fun doing it. I thank you all.
Further, Councilor Scott, did you have something?
Yeah, and I would just add one more thing. As city council president, or anybody that's city council president, I would offer that, if there feels like there's something that needs to be discussed, something feels like it's off, then there should be, I think that the chair of the planning board should be more than willing to reach out. And Lucy did reach out to me a while ago. So I think that that's something that we can definitely, continue that. And so that there can be that discussion happening and some comfort level that there's, I'll be honest, if there's something we can't discuss, I'll tell you, right? But that at the same time continues that conversation and that transparency so that we understand where we're all sitting at, so.
Sounds good.
Did you have anything to add, Chair Bisson?
No?
I appreciate the discussion and everyone's input. Thank you very much. I guess we will let staff propose some times for a meeting. We are now moving forward, and I just wanted to thank everyone here for their service tonight. Thank you. Or thank everyone tonight for their service, not just tonight's service. And now we're back to Director Hediger and Planner Norton. We're going to review the traffic study near Farwell Street, correct?
Correct. So I just want to give you folks a quick update because it's been some time since we've talked about this. It was back in February when there was discussions about rezoning this property. The neighbors became concerned out there, questions about whether or not it should be straight rezoning, contract zone. Then the neighbors also raised concerns about traffic. So if you remember, the council directed staff to work on a contract zone if that was something that the property owner was interested in. And I believe they are interested in that. I've had a couple conversations with them and we'll be revisiting that here in the next few weeks. The other directive that was given to administration at that time was, hey, let's look into the traffic, maybe to see what's going on out there with respect to concerns from the neighbors. So we received a draft report last week. I've given you the executive summary and the some of the recommendations that they've provided at this point. Haven't given you a whole report at this point because we've had some questions, and I've shared it with the property owner as well in the event that they may have some more detailed questions that we can get back to the engineers, so we have a solid report to provide to both committees here. Long and short of it is that there's plenty of capacity out there. What we asked them to do was to come up with a study that takes into consideration 200 trips. 200 trips, back up. If you remember, traffic movement permit, a lot of this was talking about when a traffic movement permit's necessary, that's when you generate 100 trips in a peak hour. If you do that, then you have to go through an additional study process, look at signals, intersections, what type of improvements might need to be done. You can go up to 200 trips, and then after 200 trips, it triggers a much larger study. So we said, cap it at 200 because we're pretty confident in speaking with the developer, they're not gonna do anything that's gonna go over 200 trips. Great. Consultant has done that, they've looked at this and they said, well, in fact, there's existing capacity out there for a lot more than what the developer will propose. If you remember, they were talking about doing some type of residential development, and I don't remember the exact number of units, but it was less than 150. There's capacity out there to do 400 units if you wanted to. Doesn't mean that there isn't going to be the need for improvements out there, changes to signals, striping, things like that. But you could do a lot more development out there than the property owners are interested in. Same goes for retail. They made some assumptions just with like a strip mall type development. And again, this is all about assumptions at this point because we're looking at it from like 30,000 feet. We could put, I think they said 40,000 square feet of retail on that property out there, and it's not going to be the end of the world. Neighbors are going to be concerned. We might be concerned because there's going to be more cars on the road at those intersections. But the fact is that the capacity exists out there if you make some improvements. Some of the general improvements are that they've recommended at this point would just improve existing conditions out there. It's come to their attention that the timing is off on some of the signals out there. Webster and Farwell, there's an issue altogether with the camera out there, which was news to staff, and it may be an easy fix or maybe an expensive fix, but small things like that. Putting in rapid flashing beacons down at the elementary school. We actually have some sitting at Public Works that we can use, so it's a matter of coordinating with Public Works and the school department to actually put those in. ADA improvements and crossing improvements. In speaking with Public Works, some of that's already in queue anyway. It could happen as soon as next year with improvements to both Farwell Street and Sabata Street with respect to doing the tip downs, improved crossings, ped signals, things like that. So there's some things that are already in the works that will just improve the situation out there for any development as it is. What the study doesn't necessarily do is it doesn't get the approval for a developer out there. It flags that there's capacity out there, that this lot can be developed, but to know exactly what improvements have to be done, like do we need to restripe a lane so there's more queuing at a traffic intersection? The report talks about there are queuing issues out there that a bunch of us are probably have experienced. But to know exactly how far to change a lane or where to put the signs, we don't necessarily know that yet because it is going to be case specific. So if they come in with a huge development, yes, there's going to be more things that need to be done. If they come in with something that's a smaller scale, the level of improvements will be a lot less. And if there's going to be an ask here at some point, and I don't know that there will be, but if there's an ask of the council or something that says, hey, council, can you help out with, the improvement of signal integration or striping? We really want to know what that is specific to a project versus going out there doing something and finding out that that wasn't really the fix, or maybe we did something that provides more capacity that isn't even going to be accounted for. That said, in discussions with Jeff Bully, the city engineer, there are a couple things that we are going to be looking to do immediately. There is some striping that we're going to change on Sabata Street this season because we know it'll fix things based upon this report. And those other things I mentioned as far as exploring the signals to see why they're not working and the other projects that are in line, as well as the rapid flashing beacons. What's also interesting here is that based upon what, again, we don't know specifically what the development will be, but there was some discussion about being senior housing. Senior housing generates less trips than your typical multifamily does. but assumptions were made using typical multifamily, so being conservative with the numbers here. You could probably do 130 units there and not even trigger a traffic movement permit. You guys won't even know about it until you get the notice from the planning board hearing. The planning board, you folks will review it, and it'll be just a traffic analysis that says we should put a crosswalk here and we're gonna put sidewalks here in the development. It's not gonna look at intersections beyond that project itself out there. So the threshold is kind of, I don't know if you want to say high or low, but I mean, to get to somewhere where we're going to have to look at a lot of intersections, you really have to do a lot of development on this lot. So that's where we're at this point. I expect that we'll probably talk to HNTB again. They're our peer reviewer for all traffic related items, and get a final report from them. I'm thinking in the next couple of weeks here. We did have a conversation with them last Friday, just to get a sense as to, do I understand what you're talking about here? And I have a decent understanding, but certainly if either group has more detailed questions, it would be great to know those, whether you share those tonight or you want to reach out to me and let me know what those are, because I'm not a traffic engineer and I might not be, I might not do the plan any favors by giving you the wrong information. So that's where we're at this point. The developer does have a copy of this, so I expect I'll hear comments back from them at some point as well. And then a final plan will be provided for you folks. I don't know that a presentation will be necessary at that point, but we'll see where it lands. I do think with respect to the contract zoning, that probably, I'm supposed to have a meeting with them here sometime in the next week, but my guess is that will probably go before the planning board sometime this summer. And recognizing you folks have a summer schedule, I don't know if that would be a July or an August meeting where there'll be a first reading.
Councilor LaChapelle?
Thank you, Director Hediger. In reading this, I felt my split personality coming out, and is in two phases. We requested this not for the development. The city council requested this specifically for the neighbors that were around there and to address Charles Street and the surrounding neighbors. And I think you recall, I really tried to push for the bigger study, not necessarily for the development. We just heard an enormous amount of complaints from the neighbors. And reading this, I did see that saying we could handle a lot more capacity, and maybe I missed it because I was fuming on not getting what we requested. Thank you for explaining it. It was more for the neighbors than the development. I agree we've all sat on Farwell Street trying to get onto Russell Street and waited, it seems like an eternity to get there. I would like to move forward and just get updates on what kind of plans you're doing now to address any of the issues. So by this report, we're saying there are no issues. The traffic flow is fine. Besides the Webster Street and Farwell intersection, there are no major issues on delays. That's the traffic flow is fine.
I wouldn't say it's fine. I'd say it is what it is out there. When the detailed study makes references to levels of service, intersections are graded like papers A through F. There are intersections out there that are functioning at a D or lower. That's not an ideal situation. Developing this property doesn't necessarily bring the level of those intersections down necessarily.
So what is this intersection now?
Which one? I'd have to look at the study, but to answer that question.
Russell, Sabattis, and East Avenue. No, Russell, Farwell, and
Yep.
Sabattis.
I can't tell you that, but I can tell you that. It's all in the study. So we looked at intersections of Sabattis and East, Russell and East, Sabattis and Farwell Connector, and Webster and Farwell. I feel like I'm missing one. There's at least 5 or 6 intersections that were taken into consideration that actually go beyond what would typically be required for the development of this site. And I hear what you're saying, it is as much about the neighbors as it is the site. but it's the sites that's driving what's going to happen in that neighborhood out there. So we did look at intersections.
They're saying even without any development, there's a problem with the intersections. That's what they're saying. So could you get back to me and just give me a rough idea what that specific intersection is graded at? Because that's Ward 4, and my phone continues to ring on that regardless of a development. Regardless of a development, they're frustrated with the flow of traffic in that neighborhood. And if the study shows that it's a B, then, you know, we've done our due diligence, we've looked at it, we've inspected it. If it's an E right now, we need to take some action and improve it. I just need some guidance from you. And that's what I was hoping the study would do, would give us some guidance. And again, I'm concerned on development, but I'm concerned on the neighborhood and the traffic flow.
Sure.
Thank you.
Well, and to Councilor LaChapelle's point, just a clarifying question. When you presented this option to the council, we were given 2 choices of scope, right? Which scope did we decide on?
The second scope that took into consideration more analysis.
The one that cost more money?
Correct.
Right, yes, okay, all right. We got like the total version.
Right. So, I mean,
Yeah.
to Council LaChapelle's point, it started looking at levels of service at other intersections. It went beyond necessarily just the immediate boundaries of this area, but it took into a greater, larger area. So we had to get counts of all these intersections so we could figure out what is the existing conditions out there today.
And to your point a few minutes ago, there are some remediations that could be made now.
That's in what I gave you here, the potential mitigation and cost analysis. Those are things that they've identified that we could do now that maybe, to the councilor's point, would improve situations. Is it going to, the stacking that you're talking about? I can offer that. I've asked that question in my understanding of it. I think your question is about on the connector road and the traffic that backs up from Sabattis and Russell going back towards Farwell and Elementary. And the trick with that, as I understand from an engineering perspective, is it doesn't happen during a peak hour. Doesn't mean it isn't a problem, but it doesn't happen during a peak hour. And peak hours are typically, you know, rush hour in the morning and rush hour in the afternoon. Because I was expecting some numbers there as well as far as how's this impact with Farwell. I've sat out there and talked to the crossing guard to see what's going on, and it's just part of the traffic out there depends on how many buses are available that day. We have the same issue with Geiger Elementary right now too, as far as cars backing up almost to Montello Heights. And some of that is driven by the number of parents that are picking up their kids now and how many bus drivers are available. So it fluctuates, but I can try to get that, you know, some better information for you as far as what happens there. But these mitigation efforts here are, I don't want to say the low-hanging fruit, but they'll make a better situation out of what's out there now.
Just so I can explain to our constituents what's going on. They're asked a question that deserves some kind of an answer. And if I don't know, if I can't articulate the answer, I'm going to send them all to you. So,
Thank you.
We have a few hands raised, but we'll try to go in order here. Councilor Scott?
Thank you. So, and just correct me if I'm wrong, you did say that there's a full study to be coming up for us in a couple of weeks, correct? The full thing is going to be available.
Yep.
So might I suggest, which might help with some of the, because I agree that we had a lot of, some of the bigger conversation we had around, it wasn't just our conversations that we both boards had about the development. It was what neighbors and folks in that community had to say about their concerns about what's happening. So I'm wondering if it would be possible after that study comes out, if that can be something that we have a meeting on. We put it on our agenda for a presentation from you with that full study so that that's out for the public to see that we're going to be talking about this study being done, and we can specifically point out some of the things that can be mitigated. You know, when we look at, like, you just referenced the rapid flashing beacons. I mean, if Public Works has that, I say let's see what we have for a conversation around that to try to put that out there. As a grandmother to a student that goes to Farwell School, I can tell you that the traffic is horrendous when you're trying to drop off or pick up over there, whether the bus is running or not. And I do agree that that is part of the situation, that when we have a bus that's not running to the area, I'm getting the phone calls for Geiger School about the traffic issues there with that. So, but it's still an issue with that. And I think that even something as simple as that flashing beacon might help mitigate some of the stuff that's happening, because some of the traffic issues we're seeing, I'm going to say this, are just bad driving from other parents that are in a rush. Okay, and I know I'm probably not going to get the most people to like me on saying that, but that is the reality. You try to pull in and out of these schools, and you have everybody. It can be quite easy if everybody just kind of followed the rules. It's like yielding off of Center Street, coming on the bridge, coming across, right? There's 2 lanes going into one. It's called a zipper, folks. It can be done if everybody knows how to drive. I know, I'm just saying it. So, and again, it's experience, right? And I know that I'm not the only person that has to experience this on a regular basis when you're picking up a child at the school. So I think doing some stuff like that might help with some of that, and then opening up that conversation when we get the full study in a couple weeks. Not to put it on the schedule then, because I know we're full, but if we can have something like that where the folks that came to us all during that whole conversation about the development can have just the conversation about the study that was done, and we can further that. And that might help answer some of the questions. Thank you.
Did you have something, Administrator Hunter?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. One of the things, from a staff review standpoint, we had a series of questions that we had just reading through the report as well, recognizing this is draft at this point, and it would allow us to not only address those questions and get the feedback from both the planning board and the council, but as well as looking at truly grading those intersections and reporting those, because that should be in the executive summary. I think that you talked about constituency. That would be great to be able to lift that off and have not only what the grade was, they talked about recommendations for approval and estimated cost of those. But one piece that they missed on is, okay, if it's a D and we're gonna do X and it costs this, what's the new grading if we do that? And that correlation between that investment. So if a project is, I don't know, $35,000, but it really doesn't change the grading, is that something that we want to do? That's the piece that I think staff found missing from that report, to be able to, lift that executive summary to have it be meaningful for the readers.
Board Member Cox.
Thank you. I appreciate the comments here, and it's both rewarding, and I apologize that you had the same experience of residents concerned with the traffic movement in that neighborhood. We did have that experience that night, and I feel like a full report will be fantastic. But I do feel like, and I guess I'm reiterating this to check for understanding, that if I was to face one of those residents in the grocery store tomorrow, which is a likely scenario, that I would be able to...
What time will you be there?
Yes, no, I'm not telling you where I shop either. So there's 2 buckets, right? One is the experience a resident in that neighborhood has currently, and their perception of that traffic flow being about development and trips, when in reality, we could say to them, yes, your experience might not be great, and that's valid, and that's not related to development, but timing issues and other things that could be remediated. And I can hold both true, that this experience is not great, and that the impact of further development is not going to change your experience significantly, because the issue isn't about development and peak flow. The issue is about timing, striping, and remediation. And so that there's 2 issues, right? The impact of development and flow through the neighborhood, and then the way our current systems are dealing with that creates a perception of too much traffic. If you wait at a light for a minute and a half in Maine, that's a traffic jam, right? And your experience is there's too much traffic. In reality, if that's a timing of the light, and one that in a perfect world would be fixed, before we look at a contract rezone, right? And they're able to experience the fact that traffic movement is much easier for them than the perception of there being an issue and the reality of there being an issue. I mean, their experience is real and valid. And we could validate that for them, but help them see the root cause is not really tied to development or activity in the neighborhood, but rather these other kind of tangible pieces. And I love that you're flagging investment and return on investment so that we can have some good guidance in what the best remediations are that'll improve resident experience and integrate good positive development in a way that's good for everybody.
Further comments or questions for staff? I realize you're not a traffic engineer, but you have some time here, so. Oh, sorry, I apologize. Planning Board Marco.
I heard Dave mention something earlier about asks. I was rather intrigued by some of the bulleted items here, one of them being the intersection at Russell and East Avenue, left turning to southbound. That's something that probably should be addressed quickly because it's not expensive. It sounds, for the people who were in those 32 crashes, if I got the number right, 7 of the 32 happened at that intersection, which has a lot to do with all of the specifics at each intersection, which I think the study did a good job of addressing. It also looked at capacity, but that capacity really is simply based on number of vehicles traveling in a straight line direction. I think one of the major concerns of the neighbors, and what wasn't addressed in here, probably because it was not project specific, is ingress and egress, because that's going to make a big difference. Now, whatever does get developed in that area, does it come out on Farwell? Does it come out on East Avenue? Does it come out on Sabattis? No, that makes a big difference, and how it impacts each of the intersections involved will make a big difference. And likewise, if we already have the equipment to put up the beacon midway on Farwell, we shouldn't even have to have a meeting. That should be just a matter of administrative process.
Yeah, I think to Mr. Marcott's point, when the study, you'll see in the study, it does take into consideration access to the site. It makes assumptions, just like it did about the number of trips that are going to occur there, that there will be access to both Farwell Street and both East Avenue. And they put modeling in there that makes an assumption that, X number are going to go this way, X number are going to go that way. So some of this is guesswork based upon the software that does these studies and whatnot. But I think that will, you'll see reference to that, so there is some understanding about where the roads will go and how to do that. But to your point, does that mean all of a sudden a turning lane is necessary out there? It's going to be specific to a project out there. What is that actual project going to be?
Board Member Albert.
So a question for you, David, for my own edification and perhaps others. So when a study is done like this, and it's certainly quantitative data, but a school is within that zone, is there an endeavor to get the qualitative data, just knowing the sensitivity of the population there with the school children? And I know you made reference to traffic actually not be, well, yes, there's peak hours tied to school, but really it depends on the buses and whatnot, but are they consulted, is really my question, without wanting to give preferential treatment per se to a particular neighbor, but it being a sensitive neighbor.
Right. Actually, one of their comments is understanding the specific neighborhood concerns and providing insight into specific effects of any development to forge better relationships. That's a recommendation. That, but when you go through an actual process, other than the public hearing, there isn't really a qualitative side of it. It is all, it's number crunching. It's the engineers putting together assumptions based on what's out there, and that's why we're here, right? Because we heard the qualitative side of it, that the numbers may be whatever they are, but I'm frustrated by the amount of traffic that I experience outside my house. So again, that's why we do the public hearings as well, to take that into consideration. And for better for worse, I would say better. That's why we've even done this process here, because of those public hearings. Otherwise, we would have just jumped right through the rezoning process.
Councilor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's unfortunate for the people that live on Farwell that things were done at both ends of the traffic flow, directing traffic from the turnpike into that area, and then the pull away on Russell Street going across the bridge. But the piece in the middle, the most important piece, ended up not being done because they waited too long, and the DEP rules that came into play with wetlands and stuff didn't allow that bypass to be built, which would have bypassed Farwell Street, brought the traffic through where the what is it, Gosling Bog? That's what happened. It was supposed to connect from the over by the turnpike to Farwell Street through the Gosling Bog to alleviate the traffic going through neighborhoods. So now we're left with the problem is we're directing traffic right through Farwell Street. I don't know if it's possible, but perhaps there's some way to discourage turning traffic onto Farwell Street and directing them down East Avenue. If you drive both ways, one of the things that I've made a conscious effort of doing is not traveling Farwell Street. Since we had the meeting with the neighbors, it's one less car going down Farwell Street, and I wish more people would do that. But the time it takes to get from going straight to East Avenue and getting to Russell Street and going down Farwell Street and getting to that Russell and East intersection is about the same. So it doesn't take any longer. It's just a mindset that people think, oh, this is the shortcut, we're going to take the shortcut. So I don't know if there's a way to, put signage and change that intersection, local traffic only, or something like that, but something to discourage people from making that turn onto Farwell Street and directing them down Webster to East, where there's better control on the traffic flow and better capacity to be able to handle it.
Board Member Pine.
I think that's a really great point there about how can we discourage traffic on the street, maybe even outside the study here. If anyone makes it down to Portland between Brighton Avenue and Congress, there's plenty of streets that have various barriers that just make it harder to drive a car quickly down there. You still have it open for local traffic, but it makes it just a little bit harder, and it gives a nice planting in the middle of the street. It's really pretty. I was just in the other Portland on the West Coast, and they have a lot of similar things where, it's a western city, so all the streets are straight and parallel, so people use them as cut-throughs, and so they've done a really great job of putting in barricades. Signs can be ignored, but a planter or a tree can't. And it's really improved the quality of those neighborhoods. There were some neighborhoods that I was walking through that didn't have those, and they were noticeably just less pleasant, less enjoyable to be in the neighborhoods that had those. I didn't have a car while I was there, so it was very nice to be able to walk, and I'm sure all the people who live in those houses enjoy walking in their neighborhoods. So the solution's out there. We don't have to reinvent the wheel for this.
Board Member Cox.
Thank you. David, to what extent, and it's okay if the answer to this question comes with the final report, but to what extent did it build in the understanding, is there a box the software checks that says contains a school, factor in X, Y? To what extent, I'd be interested in hearing that because there are numbers crunched for school developments too. And Kapisic Ave in Portland, there is a neighborhood that has raised tables that you do not want to go faster than 30 miles an hour through that neighborhood. And people choose not to go that way, right? Even though it is a shortcut to get over to kind of outer Congress Street, people don't take that shortcut. They go to the full intersection, much like East Ave would be, and then they turn from there. And people who live in that neighborhood are happy to drive 20 miles over the raised table. And there is a school right at the intersection that starts those raised tables. So I don't know if that's a case example that you could point the engineers to, where there really is unique factors around additional children walking to school, parents walking to school, the extra complications of buses and queuing and parents having to drive their own children now. But I think being explicit to say we want you to model in the school, and that this neighborhood has a peak hour at 7:30 and 3, as well as the traditional 9 and 5, or whatever Farwell School actually
Yeah,
is.
I'll check, but I believe they actually did counts for Farwell to see what was going on out there.
Further comments? Anything further you'd like to add, Director Hediger?
No, I'll work with administration to figure out when we're coming back with the final report for an update.
Excellent. And so this, Councilor Clement, do you have something?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question for Director Hediger. One thing that stood out as I read this, the installation of signal backplates with retroreflective borders, $3,000 per intersection. Is that a whole head for a traffic signal, or is that just a frame that mounts around?
Isn't that just the frame that goes around this? It's that frame that goes around the existing headlight.
And I'd like to get the name and address of the company I want to put in for a job with them at $3,000. What is an aluminum frame with retroreflective material around it? It's pretty expensive. Thank you.
Okay, without further comments, this will conclude our joint work session. Thank you very much. And unless there's real cause for concern, we will head straight into the joint special meeting. Welcome to the joint special meeting between the Planning Board and City Council. We will kick things off with the Pledge of Allegiance, and Chair Bisson, will you lead us?
Oh, good Lord, no.
Member Cox.
Yes, absolutely. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I want to apologize for putting our chair on the spot there. And thank you for filling in here.
Girl Scouts of America.
I'm sorry.
Madam Clerk, I believe we're ready to begin.
Yes, sir, thank you. We have one item on the joint special meeting agenda, which is resolve, adopting the 2023 Riverfront Island Master Plan update and authorizing the planning board to oversee the implementation of the plan. Requested action, to approve the resolve, adopting the 2023 Riverfront Island Master Plan update and authorizing the planning board to oversee the implementation of the plan.
May I have a motion,
So
please?
moved.
For passage.
Councilor McCarthy, followed by Councilor Clement. Discussion? Public comment? Back to the council. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Counselor from Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4.
Yes.
We will note for the record that the counselor from Ward 5 is absent. Ward 6,
Yes.
Ward 7.
Yes.
And Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, staff.
Mr. Mayor, we are
Yes.
going to have the planning board vote now to
Excellent.
accept it.
Do we have a motion from the planning board?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Oh. Can I have someone else second? I don't think you're a voting member tonight, sorry.
That's right, shoot. Still thinking about last night.
I will second.
Thank you. Roger Dufresne,
Yes.
Joshua Najin,
Yes.
Michael Marcotte,
Abstain.
Shanna Cox,
Yes.
Amy Smith,
Yes.
Lee Albert,
Yes.
Lucy Bisson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Are you all set? Planner Norton?
Yes, I am, sorry.
Okay. Administrator Hunter, did you have something?
No, we are all set with this piece.
Yes, may I have a motion to adjourn?
moved.
Councilor LaChapelle,
Second.
second by Councilor Clement. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Counselor from Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4,
Yes.
Ward 6.
Yes.
Ward 7.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Thank you to the planning board for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We're going to stick around for a bit.
We're gonna be great. We're gonna be great for it.
You know, I urge you to head straight home and watch us. You know, Councilors, we're going to stand at ease for like 10 seconds just as they filter out, and then we'll get right to it. It was really great to have you, but please head out right now so we can get going. Yeah, exactly.
Throw my little binder. Have fun. So Linda's late.
And we are, where are we? Okay. We are now having a special meeting of the Lewiston City Council. And Madam Clerk, we are ready to begin.
Yes, thank you. There's one item on the agenda this evening, Mr. Mayor, which is public hearing and adoption of the order approving an amendment to the establishment of the Wedgewood Development Affordable Housing Tax Increment Financing District and Development Program. Requested action. There are 2 items for requested action. The first item is to conduct a public hearing on the proposed amendment to the establishment of the Wedgewood Development Affordable Housing Tax Increment Financing District and Development Program.
So
I have a Councilor Jelinek, second by Councilor Harriman. Assistant Director Parker, please kick us off.
Great, thank you so much. So tonight before you is a request to amend and restate our joint development agreement and development program for the Wedgewood Development Affordable Housing Tax Increment Finance District Development Program. So this item came to our attention with Maine Housing in reviewing the TIF district for approval and identified the need to update the documents to reflect the change in TIF term because in accordance with the joint development agreement that council approved back in November, there was a provision that said if construction loan closing does not close by May 1st of 2023, the TIF term would bump 1 year. So it's not changing the credit enhancement term that would go back to the developer. It would just extend it so that the payments back to the developer would begin a year later and correspond correctly with their construction timing. So where we are right now, the development has not closed on their construction loans. They are slated to close within the next 4 to 6 weeks. Right now, on our HUD side, for the Choice Neighborhood Funds, for all of the country, there is only one attorney reviewing all Choice Neighborhood construction closing. So they have indicated that they would be prepared in early June on their side. Maine Housing has indicated towards the end of May. So everyone is working diligently to get to construction closing. We're feeling very comfortable by that, but we were unable to meet that May 1st provision. This requirement in the joint development agreement essentially made the possibility of our TIF district being a term of 20 years, 21 years. However, the development program documentation did not include that as well. So you should see through the amended documents just noting that it is in fact a 21-year TIF district. The credit enhancement term for the developer remains 16 years. So those are the changes that are noted just to affirm that yes, this is in fact a provision that was agreed to and what the district would look like because we haven't met that May 1st timeline. It would also just add a couple corrections to the joint development agreement where some items have already happened. Like, for example, there's a provision in there that says an environmental review will be completed. And it notes now it has been completed. So there's a couple items like that just to correct things that have happened. Lastly, the provision that says we will extend this 1 year if construction closing does not happen by May 1st has been removed. So that's that section 2H13. That has been replaced now with a statement just saying this is reaffirming what has already been approved on November 15th. So
So, Assistant Director Parker, so just, from my understanding and the public's understanding, timelines have shifted a little bit, and this updated agreement reflects that.
Correct. Does not change the nature of the agreement, but just affirms what was already approved.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the council? And the public comment, and now we're back, and Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Sure. So actually, Mr. Mayor, we opened the public hearing. No members of the public were here. So now if we could have the next item, which is requested action number 2, which is to adopt the order approving an amendment to the establishment of the Wedgewood Development Affordable Housing Tax Increment Financing District and Development Program.
As always, I'm very glad you're here, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, we will do that. Do we need a motion?
Yes, please.
So moved.
Councilor McCarthy?
Second.
Second by Councilor Jelinas. Anything further you'd like to add?
No.
Okay. And Councilor Clement?
Just one comment, if I might. I'm concerned, maybe without justification, but this seems to be a common thread with some of the people involved here. We're saying 4 to 6 weeks we can anticipate closing.
That is correct. Yes.
We have no guarantee of that. It's just what we anticipate currently. I mean, there are several other projects where some of the entities involved have looked for extensions, asked for extensions, indicated they needed another extension. And I would just hate to see, if this doesn't come to fruition within this year, what happens? How long is that money available to us?
So I would just want to clarify, they have applied for their building permits, received their building permits. Hebert will be mobilizing on the site in just 2 weeks. I have gotten confirmation of that. Everyone is waiting to go. It's just a matter of the number of financing, entities that are involved in the closing, and just making sure all the pieces are in accordance and can close on the same date. And so, while yes, this may be very frustrating and concerning that it feels like another delay, that's originally why we did account for this possibility in the original joint development agreement, because these things do come up, and while we are all feeling confident in November that we would be closing on construction on May 1st, we also understood this could be a possibility, and we'd be looking at June or even July, because these types of things do come up, and so we wanted to make sure to account for that.
After all, it's all about the money. I understand that, but it's not comforting when these things seem to happen with regularity. So, fool me once, fool me twice, whatever. Thank you much, Mr. Mayor.
Further comments? Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Counselor from Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
We will note that the counselor from Ward 5 is absent. Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
And Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you very much.
And now I believe we're headed to executive session, Madam Clerk.
Yes, executive session. The motion before you is to enter into an executive session pursuant to Maine Revised Statutes annotated Title I, Section 4056C, to discuss an economic development issue of which the premature disclosure of the information would prejudice the competitive bargaining position of the city.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Councilor Clement, followed by Councilor McCarthy. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Counselor from Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Thank you to everyone who tuned in to our special joint meeting and then this other special meeting. We're heading to executive session. We will not be back. Have a wonderful evening, Lewiston.